In 1829, when Emerson was 26 years old, he married a woman named Ellen Tucker, who was 18 at the time. They'd been courting each other for 2 years. This was a very intimate, energetic relationship. Emerson, around the time he met Ellen, was a very bookish man, retiring, quiet. Ellen was not. She was a fire plug. She stimulated Emerson's mind, stimulated Emerson's heart, stimulated Emerson's body. It was a truly wonderful romance. Soon after Emerson married Ellen Tucker, he was offered a pastorship, a Unitarian pastorship at Boston's second church, Unitarian church. This was a very prestigious and cushy job. Emerson had gone to Harvard, as had his father. He studied in Harvard Divinity School, and now he was becoming a minister, as Emerson's father had also become a minister. So here he is. He's a young man, and he seems to have it made. Beautiful wife, madly in love with her, cushy position, prestigious position. But Ellen becomes ill. She becomes ill with tuberculosis, and she dies in 1831. This shakes Emerson deeply. So deep was his grief that within a year of her death, he walked out to the graveyard where she was buried, and he opened her coffin and looked at her corpse. The day he did this, he wrote in his journal, walked to the graveyard, looked at Ellen, opened Ellen's coffin. Very terse, nothing else. This was not an uncommon practice at the time. It wasn't common, but there were precedents for it. Abraham Lincoln looked at his young boy Willie after he had died. It was a way of mourning, but it was more than just a way of mourning. For Emerson, to me, this marks a moment of existential courage. He had to know. He wanted to know what his wife looked like dead, as morbid as that is. Emerson developed into a thinker who, with great courage, looked into the darker parts of the human psyche, looked into the darker parts of the natural world. This was a man who, while largely optimistic, while largely enamored of what we would call light and life, was also fearless in his exploration of the dark. This is a man who was in a deep existential crisis. Soon after he walked out to the graveyard and looked at Ellen's corpse, he started questioning the Unitarian theology that he was meant to espouse every Sunday in Boston's second church. He wondered, for instance, why should the church practice communion? Indeed, why should there be rituals that we need to manifest the Spirit to us, when in fact, the Spirit is everywhere? I can go out into the woods and there is God. I can go across a meadow, there is God. I can walk into a creek, there is God. I don't need to be in a church. I don't need communion. I don't even need the Bible. Emerson, with these doubts, decided to resign his position from Boston's second church. Get the flavor of this. You're going to Wake Forest. It's a very expensive education. Maybe you'll go to law school or med school or get an MBA. Very expensive. And then you get the job you want. But after 2 or 3 years, you think, no, I don't want this after all. I want to go learn to paint. I want to go work to help hungry people. This would be the equivalent of what Emerson did. He walked away from the best job he could possibly imagine for himself. And he sailed to Europe on Christmas Day, 1833. And while in Europe, he met some of his poetic heroes. He met Wordsworth. He met Coleridge, quite old at this time. He also met Thomas Carlyle, who would become one of the great writers of the British Victorian Age. He met John Stuart Mill as well, who would also flower during the Victorian Age. But most importantly, he went to a place called the Jardin des Plantes, which was a museum devoted to botanical and zoological phenomena connected with the Louvre. And as he walked through the cabinets in which these botanical and zoological specimens were laid out, he saw that these specimens were not classified according to external traits, how they looked to the naked eye from the outside. They were classified according to internal traits. And when Emerson looked at the interior structures of all these various animals, he realized they all kind of look alike. That one animal is an analogy for another animal. One animal is a metaphor for another animal. And suddenly it dawned on him that his own interior structures were not that different from those of animals who on the outside looked quite different. So he wrote in his journal later, as he walked through these cabinets in the Jardin des Plantes, I feel within me the scorpion. I feel within me the crayfish. I feel within me the carp. I feel within me the snake. I vow I will be a naturalist. He sails back to the United States and makes good on that vow. He starts reading assiduously in science. He starts lecturing in local lyceums around Boston and Concord on science. But most importantly, he writes his essay called Nature from 1836, in which he marks very clearly a move away from a worldview that is desirous of transcending matter, that would be Christianity, to a worldview that is desirous of sinking into matter. He was most interested in the science of electromagnetism, in particular Michael Faraday, who was showing around this time electromagnetic induction, which ultimately says that matter is not solid, but matter is a pattern of electromagnetic energy. So suddenly what was once spirit for Emerson, this wispy metaphysical idea of soul, becomes very palpable and physical. And this turns him on not only insofar as it gives him a more textured, palpable relationship with the natural world, but also he starts to wonder, can words themselves have electromagnetic charges? And he concluded, yes. And this became the primary impetus for his writing style.